It is Book Review Sunday, and today I am reviewing two different books. But the matching theme for these two books is they both got 5 stars from me, which means I have no critiques for the story or the writing or editing, characters, anything like that. So let's get started with story number one. The Dragon Prince's Obsession. So, this book is by an author whose pen name is Ninally, and they publish their books on the reading app Dream, Dreame. This is where I get a lot of my fated mate shifter romance stories from. This one, however, isn't exactly a fated mate trope, though it is a shifter romance. So, as you can tell by the title, this one has dragons in it. And this is a sequel. The first book was called The Dragon King's Obsession, and I don't think I reviewed it on my channel. I believe I read the first book before I started doing book reviews. So, this sequel is about the king's brother, who is the prince, since the king doesn't have any children yet, and then the woman that he's going to fall in love with. So, I'm going to give you just a short introduction to the first book. So, the Dragon King is named Nico, and well, his full name is Nico Creon, and some people call him Nico for short. Some people call him Creo or Creon for short. Anyway, the Dragon Kingdom is actually at war with humans during the first book, and the Dragon King captures a human woman who is a hunter and the daughter of the most notorious hunter family. And her name is Mystique. And he captures her and places her kind of in a not his physical hoard, but more of a symbolic hoard, like she is my treasure now. And then while she fights the attraction she feels for him, they're going to fall in love, and then she will end up as his queen. So the second book kind of starts not too far after the first book ends, and we have new main characters and new villains. So Mikal is the prince, and Adela is the human woman that he's going to fall in love with. And while they're falling in love, they have a threat from a nearby witch's coven who wants to take down the Dragon Kingdom, and they want to use Adela and Mikal to do so. So let's jump into why I gave this excellent story 5 stars. Number one, dragon shifters are kind of my thing at the moment. As a romantasy reader, I definitely go through stages and phases of certain types of stories, and I'm definitely on a dragon shifters high right now as I'm looking through book recommendations. If dragon shifters are in it, I am going to put it on my to be read list. And I especially like the world building that the author did with these particular dragons. So they're born in human form and they can shift relatively early. A lot of shifter authors have their shifters shift into it kind of when their body hits puberty. 13, 16, 18 tends to be the normal shifting ages, but little 5-year-olds are shifting into their dragons in this world, which I find very neat. And then we also have this idea that this particular author has created is that the dragons are dragons, like of course they are, but their dragon and their human kind of mesh in personality and characteristics. So these older dragon stories where it's the just a dragon where they have like a hoard of treasure, these dragons have those as well. And I kind of brought that up when I was talking about the first book where um, Nico makes Mystique his treasure. She is now a treasure in his hoard. And so these royal dragons have these hidden hoards that even their own parent or sibling and sometimes even their spouse don't know where it's located because they are very protective of their treasure. And so there's going to be a moment where McCall lifts the protective enchantments over his hoard and allows Adela to see where his hoard is and what is inside of it. And that's a huge step in trust and love in their relationship. And in the first book, Nico is going to be constantly going to his hoard and bringing back really expensive and beautiful jewelry for Mystique to wear to show that he cares for her because he's willing to let her wear something from his hoard. So I just thought that was a cool little world building thing the author did to use to show dragons showing their love for someone when it's like, oh yeah, you can have this thing from my hoard, or you can actually see where my hoard is and what's inside of it. So that was really cool. Another interesting thing with this is that the type of dragon a shifter is shows their power. So obviously the king is a black dragon, and that's the most powerful dragon there is. And his dragon is actually kind of a tattoo on his body. So he can shift into his dragon, but he can also make his dragon come off of him and they can be two separate beings. And he's the only one who can do that. All the other dragons just simply shift into their dragons. Next, we have our two main tropes for this, which is an enemies to lovers and a grumpy sunshine type of tropes and character arcs going on. So Adela and McCall, I wouldn't say they hate each other because they don't really know each other, but McCall hates Adela just because she's human or he thinks she's human. And Adela is terrified of him because he's the evil demon prince that everyone is scared of from the first book. McCall makes a lot of bad choices in the first book that kind of solidifies him as definitely an antagonist and heading in. He kind of heads into villain territory in the first book. And so this is a really interesting. I don't want to call it a redemption arc because he never fully makes up for what he does in the first book. He just kind of makes some small changes so that he can, his brother can validate keeping him alive and allowing him to stay in the kingdom. And normally I'm pretty expectant of redemption arcs. I need them to be believable and I need them to be good. But this one, not really having a true redemption arc, I ended up being okay with. So back to enemies to lovers. McCall hates humans because humans tricked his father into a peace meeting that was actually an ambush and killed his father. And then his older brother, who should have been king, um, went into battle to get revenge and died in that battle as well. And the kingdom normally doesn't accept humans, but humans who are running away from their past or not accepted in their own villages for whatever reason end up in the Dragon Kingdom and they're working low level jobs. Like Adela is a servant in the palace and basically her job is to follow the princess and the queen around and do whatever they want her to do. So she's terrified of Prince Mikhail. He hates her because he thinks she's human, and they are going to end up both captors to this witch coven. And while Adela is escaping, she helps Mikhail escape as well. So then he owes her, since she technically saved his life, and he finds himself attracted to her, and he doesn't know why. He doesn't want to be because he thinks she's human, and but there's still that dragon instinct of, oh, this is going to be my treasure now, so I'm going to take her. So he takes her to his palace to live with him, but it's not going to start off as romantic as Nico's and Mystique's story in the first book. We also have a grumpy sunshine trope. Mikhail is a very angry person from losing his father and losing his older brother and just spending decades hating humans. And Adela is a, for the most part, she was happy in the palace. And so she's going to bring that sunshine into Mikhail's life. And this book is going to introduce a new species to the world building. So in the first book, we have dragons, we have humans, we have witches. And if you caught on to how I kept saying Mikhail thinks Adela's human, it's going to show us some hints pretty early on that she's not. And Adela also thinks she's human. Everyone thinks she is human. And telling you what she is will give away the ending, so I'm not going to do that. But we're getting an introduction to a new species, what Adela is, where she comes from, and we're going to meet a few more characters from her species as well. And then the last thing, this kind of goes along with the lack of redemption arc that I was talking about, is that our male main character, or Mikhail, he's not going to lose his original personality as he grows, as he accepts his attraction to Adela, as he accepts his love for her, and decides that he doesn't want to lose her. And when I say he doesn't want to lose her, not just her life, I mean, he's going to protect her life no matter what, but he doesn't want her to go back to his brother's palace and be a servant again. He wants her to live with him and be with him. So as he makes that growth, and in that growth, he's going to calm down a little bit, but we aren't going to lose that original Mikhail, that original brooding, tall, dark, and handsome type of thing. He's not ever going to accept his sister-in-law. He does not like Mystique. She does not like him. And they're just going to learn to tolerate each other. He's not going to become this sunshiny, happy man and move back into the main palace and all of that. He still keeps a lot of his personality traits, but the growth that he does is for his relationship with Adela. And that's why I said I think that it works, because as Adela learns about herself and her powers and abilities for what she actually is, she's going to stop being accepted in the original palace that she was a servant in. And to be honest, she wasn't really accepted. She was a servant. Like, it really bugged me that she thought so low of herself that she's just like, yeah, I can just be a human servant in this palace full of dragons who think they're better than me. And so Mikhail, even though he hates humans, does get to that point where he tries to teach her to value herself more than just a servant. So they end up being really, really good for each other. And I just loved this book so much. So that is the Dragon Prince's Obsession, and it is a romance, and the heat level is sensual, or 3 flames. Book number 2, we're going to jump to the opposite type of story. This is not a romance. Five Steps to Celestia is by Terry Segan and or Sagan, and this is the second book of hers that I've read. The first was a paranormal murder mystery, and this one is also kind of a type of mystery story. We have some background villains that have not been identified by the main character, though the reader gets little glimpses of them, and the main character has to figure out what's going on. So, what the main character, her name is Joy, is dealing with is memory loss. She was in a motorcycle accident 22 years prior to the start of the story, and she never gets her memory back. And so she ends up being courted by the doctor who treated her after her accident. And when she's no longer a patient, they start dating and they get married, and she becomes a stepmom to this doctor's daughter. They never have any biological children of their own, and she adopts the doctor, her husband's daughter, and becomes the mom to her daughter, whose name is Grace. And when the story starts, her husband has passed away, so she's now a widow, and Grace is an adult and is married. And she goes on a road trip with her best friend and buys a package of seeds that the seeds are called Celestia. And she just feels like she should buy them. She doesn't know why, so she buys three. And the package says 5 steps. Step one, plant. But there's no other steps after plant. And she's like, did I buy an incomplete package? Well, I'll just see what happens. So she plants the seeds, and then when the planting process has been complete, step two magically appears on the back of the package, the instructions. And so when each step gets complete, the next step will magically appear. And while this is happening, she's having this drama with her daughter and her son-in-law because she owns a winery and she wants to retire, but she wants to sign the winery over to her daughter, Grace. Grace doesn't want to be in charge of the winery. Her husband wants his name to be on the ownership, but Joy doesn't trust him. And while this is happening, they are going to hire someone to help out in the tasting room, and this person's going to be a little sketchy. And so let's dive into the review. So we have these plants that have really interesting magical instructions, plus family drama with the family business. So what I liked about this is the world building. So these magical seeds are going to end up coming from a different planet, which some of the characters are going to have a connection to. And what I really liked about what Terry did with this story is that, for lack of a better word, these alien abilities that the people from this planet who are now living on Earth, everything is a lot more fantasy than science fiction. I'm not against science fiction or aliens. If you've watched previous episodes, I've done plenty of alien human romance reviews. But it was just, different. There's not the high-tech gear, the high-tech spaceships, the little wristwatches that let them do whatever. It felt more magic-based. The jewelry that these people from this other world had, their magical seeds, everything was just more fantasy-based. And as someone whose preferred genre is fantasy, I really enjoyed that. They have these necklaces that are specific colors, and the colors tell you what lineage they come from and what their abilities are. So it was just very fun. It was just very different for aliens being involved in this. Next, and Terry does a good job of this in her other books as well, is showcasing family difficulties. We all, and it just makes the characters more relatable. Like mentioned when I was telling you about the main plot, you know, Joy is, I mean, she did adopt Grace, she did raise her, so she is her mom in every sense of the word. Um, but now they're dealing with the man that made them a family is dead. And Grace, the daughter, still calls Joy mom, still, loves her and views her as a mom. But she's also an adult now and is making her own choices. And so when Grace makes choices Joy doesn't like, Joy really struggles with how to handle that and what she should and should not say to Grace. And especially when Grace is having marital problems with her husband. And that's going to be one of the main issues that kind of brings everything together with this sketchy uh, taste room assistant and other stuff going on. And so Joy struggles to stay out of it, but also when she realizes that Grace needs to make her own decisions, there was a few times where I'm like, yes, Grace is an adult and she needs to make her own decisions, but you at least need to share certain information with her. And so that whole idea of boundaries and where's the line to cross when your children are adults and making their own choices is definitely showcased very well in this book and will give the reader a lot to think about with our only family with our own family relationships. Another thing is that Joy ends up meeting a distant or an absent family member from before she lost her memories and struggles with that person's choices as well because they were making choices for her, which and without her knowledge because she lost her memory, and so she's very mad at this person. And this kind of goes into how she ends up mothering Grace because she's mad at this person for making choices for her for the last 2 decades. And so that's why she doesn't want to make the same mistake with Grace. And then I ended up writing a full length blog post about this final point is that this book really, and by extension, Terry, the author, taught me, help me appreciate flawed characters. And I say this, I talk about flawed characters a lot in my typed up book reviews when I'm talking with other readers and other authors. If a character's too perfect, they're boring, but I'm also of the idea most of the time that their certain flaws need to be overcome by the end of the book. It needs to be a part of their character arc and their character growth. And something I've seen with the two books I've read of Terry's is that, especially if it's a side character, their flaws get do not always get fixed by the end of the story. And that's something that I learned is another way to to connect these stories to our own lives. Um, so one of the side characters, Susie, drove me absolutely crazy most of the book. And I almost gave this book 4 stars because of Susie's character because I could not stand her. And then I took a step back and asked myself, did any of Susie's personality issues change the larger plot of the book? And the answer was no. She She definitely has moments where some of her choices, create a bump in the road or even make things a little bit smoother for Joy because Susie's helping her. But the stuff that bugged me about Susie didn't affect the main plot and it didn't affect how the story ended. So why would me being annoyed with her take away a star in that regard? And it's just my personal view and how I'm choosing to review books. Um, and we all have a friend or a family member like her, and that's probably why she annoyed me so much. And then I had some similar issues with Grace and her husband, where he makes a pretty big no no early on in the book. And most people can't forgive their spouse for that. And Grace chooses to forgive him. And whoa, it blew me away. And so then that I had to take a step back and be like, okay, does Grace forgiving him change the overall plot of the book? No. Does it change how the book ends? No. Okay, everything's going to be fine then. And I really think the book ended with a possibility for a sequel, and so I think some of those issues may even get further resolved in the next book if there is one, which I hope there is. I will definitely be reading it. So, if you like shifter romances, check out the Dragon King's Obsession and then the Dragon Prince's Obsession by Ninally. You can find them on the Dream Reading app. And then, if you like mystery and fantasy and otherworld type of situations, then check out Five Steps to Celestia by Terry Segan. And I will see you next time. Click that subscribe button so that you can know when another episode is published. Also, let me know in the comments if you've read either of these two books and what you thought of them, or give me some recommendations in the same genres.